All entrepreneurial organizations are led by entrepreneurs that think their product or service is the most important thing. But the minute you hire one person, now people are the most important thing. When I got to Starbucks, it was coffee was the most important thing. That's all they talked about was coffee. Coffee, 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 which is great. I'm a lover of coffee, and I've been a customer for a long time of Starbucks. But I kept saying it's not about the coffee, it's about the people. I kept asking, what business are we in? And I coined this term, this little phrase, because I was trying to convince everybody and I said, we're not in the coffee business serving people, we're in the people business serving coffee. And believe it or not, it's been, well over 30 years, that phrase still is alive at Starbucks today.
Today, I have such a treat for all you Java lovers and even non-Java lovers out there. And rather than me share any information about this incredible man, leader, father, I want to just introduce Howard Behar to you, the former president of Starbucks, who revolutionized the way we drink and order our coffee. So welcome, Howard. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. So Howard, I am struck by when I always try to find obscure things about people, although I think you're pretty much out there. I don't think you have any secrets, but I was struck by, it sounds like you credit working in your parents' market store, I guess a grocery store in Seattle, right, with how you learned how to be a leader, run a consumer-oriented business. So tell me a little bit about that early influence, because I suspect you grew up in the store like most people did. So let's hear about that.
So, the store was my babysitter after school. I would go, come from home from school and go to the store. My dad was working, my mom was working there. And so I was there every day. And, you learn a lot by watching your parents. They don't have to say anything, you learn a lot by just watching what they do. And, probably one of the most significant experiences I had that I didn't recognize until much later in life was one day I was about maybe 8 or 9 years old, and my dad was ringing a customer up on the cash register. This was an old hand crank cash register, with the 10 buttons across, 10 buttons down. And he had charge accounts for everybody, because they were not just our customers, they're our neighbors and our friends.
Sure.
So he had rung a customer up, and then he looked at me and said, "Howard, would you go get me some?" I can't even remember now if it was bananas or strawberries. And I went back and got them and brought them up, and he put them in the bag, and the customer walked out the door. And I was old enough to recognize my dad hadn't rung those up on the cash register, because you always waited for the bing,
Right.
And so I said, "Dad, you forgot to ring those up." And he just looked at me and said, not Howard, not everything we do in life do we need to get paid for. And I happen to know these people love fresh fruit, and they can't afford it right now. And, they're not just our customers, they're our neighbors and our friends. It's just my way of helping them out. But I never forgot those words. Not everything we do in life do we need to get paid for. And that kind of has influenced me my whole life, my whole business career, is that, sometimes you just do things because you want to, out of the kindness of your heart or somebody else's need, and you don't worry whether you get paid for it or not. And I don't mean just monetarily get paid for it, but I mean, emotionally getting paid for it. You do it because it's the right thing to do, and it makes you feel better. And so that lesson, took me on, and I carried that forward to Starbucks. As a matter of fact, that's how I got to Starbucks. I was interviewing with Howard Schultz, who was the CEO then, and he's come back.
By the way, Howard Schultz grew up in Starrett City in New York, not far from where I grew up. So
yeah, right.
That's Brooklyn or Queens, but I know the humble background from him, which seems like he never.
In Canarsie.
I used to work at a clinic there. Yes.
So anyway, I said to Howard, before you make an offer, before I decide to join the company, I'd like to work in the company for a week. I want to do it. I'll do it for free. And here's what I'd like to do. I want to work in the stores for a few days. I'd like to work in the plant for a few days, and I'd like to work in the trucks for a few days. And I did that for a week. And after that first week, I had a pretty good feeling of what the company was like. And fortunately, Howard extended an offer for me to join the company, and kind of the rest was history.
So, excuse me. So it sounds like you were looking to see what the culture was.
Yeah,
Is that
I want to know what the culture was, and I wanted to know, what the people were like, and what the business was like, and whether or not what he said was true. And
so you were the undercover boss before you were the undercover boss.
Yeah, I wasn't even undercover. I was just, I was looking to be, to be a boss, so to speak. But I was just working side by side with everybody that was there. Yeah, it's true though. That's kind of like it.
Now I saw that you went to a community college.
Yes.
So everything about your servant leadership, there's so many aspects of who you are as a person that identifies and defines who you are as a leader, as a president of a company. That really was groundbreaking. How do you reconcile the way, like Starbucks is so unique? It's still a publicly traded company, right? So you still have the quarterly, right? Is it publicly traded, or you guys?
It's publicly traded.
So today, the way things are is, if you don't meet your numbers, you're out. And people absolutely talk the game that you talk. They talk about putting the employee first. They talk about, really the employee first, and then they'll take care of the customers. But they don't, in fact, live that way. Right. And you did. So how were you able to stay true to that? And honestly, I know people, I have friends whose kids have worked in Starbucks, working their way through high school and college, and they loved it. Because they did feel it wasn't the same as working for Dunkin' Donuts. Am I allowed to say that?
Sure.
It was very different. So how did you do that?
Well, there's no inherent conflict between producing results, between making money and treating people well. That's fiction, right? You can treat people well and still make a profit and make money. I used to operate under the philosophy, the goal isn't to maximize profit, the goal is to optimize. And that means that, there's lots of different constituencies that you serve. And so you have to serve all of them. And so optimization means that you're taking care of everybody. And, is it equal? No, not always, but how you treat people really has nothing to do with money. Kindness and love and caring have nothing to do with whether you're rich or poor. Mm-hmm. And great leaders in great organizations understand that, even when somebody doesn't live up to your expectations, you still treat them with respect and dignity. I used to say, you love them as much going out the door as you loved them coming in the door. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's just a way of living. Servant leadership is not a business principle, right? It's a life principle. It's the understanding that all of us are put on this earth to serve others. There's no role that any of us will play in our lives. It doesn't make any difference, doctor, lawyer, engineer, architect, fire chief, barista, nurse. It doesn't make any difference. Podcaster, whatever you do, you're here to serve other human beings. And as long as you remember that, and remember that you're there to put other people first, you'll get what you need out of life. It follows.
You say it, Howard, and it makes such perfect sense. However, that's the exception today to the rule. You hire people and you ask them how you can meet their needs, right? How you can help them, how you can help them optimize to, it's cliched, but be the best that they can be, and then they will bring their best selves. It sounds so simple, it's common sense, and yet it's so not practiced. So how did we lose our way?
Well, I don't know that we ever lost our way. I think we've been through cycles.
Okay.
Right? I mean, if you look at the early 1900s, the Chevrons and all the companies that were operating then, they were pretty greedy companies. And the leaders were pretty greedy. And then when we went through a cycle after the Second World War, unionization came in, and General Motors treated its people pretty well, paid them pretty well. Ford actually did, and so they found it's just we've gone through these cycles, and then we went through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s of greed. When I forget who the economist said, the sole purpose of a company is to make money. It's just not true.
Well,
And now,
Jack Welch also drove that home too.
yeah, and now we're back in this mode that we understand that's not the sole purpose of a company. We're here to provide jobs to help people grow as human beings, and in so doing, they help the organization. I think there's a lot of companies that practice servant leadership. They may not call it that, but they practice it. I can think of companies in my own backyard, Nordstrom, Costco, et cetera. And there's some that haven't been that way. And I'll give you
Nordstrom and Costco, it's interesting you mentioned those two, both of which I'm a fan of. They are known for incredible customer service.
Yeah.
They are absolute. You go into Nordstrom, you feel like you're the only person in the store. Costco, their whole philosophy, what is it? They charge only 15% above.
Yeah.
There's not greed at all. It is, you do feel that. That's interesting.
I feel it. I mean, we've had companies in the technology business that hadn't, Microsoft is a great example. It was kind of a harsh environment in the early days, and it stayed that way for a long time until basically leadership changed, and the guy that was there comes in and he changes the whole philosophy. And he says the single most important skill that any leader needs to have is empathy. Right? That changes.
I think you read my notes. I was going to ask you about that later.
Here was a company that was, their stock had been languishing for like 10 years. And this guy comes in, that's basically what he does. He makes it a people-centric company, and all of a sudden it starts to produce again. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm 77 years old. I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. I've reported to assholes. I've worked for great people, and I'll tell you, there is a huge difference. And look, you don't do this because you want to get rich. That's not the goal. The goal of servant leadership isn't to make money. The goal of servant leadership is to do good things. And in so doing, you'll make money. Mm-hmm. But, there's, a company like Uber was terribly led by the founder. Mm-hmm. WeWork, another company like that. Tyco or whatever. Yeah. I mean, we know them all. And yet we know good ones too. The Container Store, one of my favorites. And it's just how you do things. And you have to make up your mind that it's the most important thing. Look, what works in a family? What makes a great family? What makes a great marriage? Great communication. Loving each other.
You're in it for each other.
Building trust. My responsibility to my wife is to help her achieve what she wants in her life, right? Is to help her live a fulfilling life, and that's my primary responsibility, and to love her, but of course, and to love my family. But I'm there to serve her, and she, in essence, is there to serve me. And together, as a team, we practice servant leadership in our family.
Mm-hmm. So, when has that been tested for you? When was it difficult? Because it's there's so much noise. It's not always easy to do the right thing. So what's an example of when you really had to dig deep and came through, but it wasn't easy?
Well, when I first got to Starbucks, By
the way, I have this for you, but this is for the Connecticut Huskies, not
the I first got to Starbucks, and we were paying minimum wage, and I wanted to raise the wages, and so I figured out that I planned to do it, and we're going to raise be at least $1 to $2 above.
Excuse me, Howard. What's the time frame there for the listeners? I just want them to.
This is in the 80s. This is okay. I joined Starbucks in '89, so this is about 1990.
All right. So after the crash.
Yeah.
Okay.
After the crash, and so I developed a plan of how to do it. We had to raise prices a little bit and do a couple other things, and so we took our wages up, and about a month or 2 months after, we got our first P&Ls back. I thought it was going to cost us 1 percentage point in our P&L. And instead it cost us 2. Well, I got a call from Howard Schultz. What's going on? And, I came back, I was on vacation. I came back from vacation and I started to dig in the numbers, and we'd made an error in our mathematics. But I didn't go back. I said, okay, I'll fix it. And we kept our wages where I wanted them to be. And we had to make some other changes, but we made them and we stayed with what we'd committed to. And that's what I always believe, do what you say you're going to do. And so the goal was to raise the wages, and we had to figure out how to make that happen. It was painful, at the beginning, but we figured it out. I mean, you do what you say you're going to do, and you live up to it. I remember I was working for another company for a big department store chain, and I had told my team that if we reached a certain goal, I'd take everybody and their spouses out to a really fancy dinner. So I did that. And I came back and my boss said, you can't do that. You got to pay for that yourself. You can't put it on your expense account. And I said, okay, I will. And I did. And because I'd made a commitment. And you live up to your commitments, even if it costs you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's also, if the ramifications for you to have not done that, you would have lost they would have lost trust in you.
I'd lost respect for myself. Most importantly.
Most importantly. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about when you first went there, right? The culture worked for you. But then what did you have to change? And what was your relationship like with Howard Schultz? How did he find you?
Well, he found me through a guy named Jeff Brotman, who I'd grown up with and was one of the co-founders of Costco, actually. And he's from Seattle area. And he kept telling me that I need to meet this young guy. And I had just come out of a career in land development. The company got in trouble. We had to sell it. And so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was in my early 40s. And so I met Howard and we had a long conversation. And he decided that he wanted somebody with a college degree and food service experience, which I didn't have.
Either one, right? I started to say that earlier about the community college, right?
And so, we parted ways. And about a year later, I ended up getting back in touch with Howard again through another person. And we went through that. We had the dance of where I worked in the company for a week. And then I ended up joining the company. So that's how I got there, and was through a friend.
So you reached out to him the second time? You reached out to him a second time?
Actually, no. A friend of his reached out to me a second time and said, we need a guy like you here.
Interesting.
And so that's how it came. So so that was, that's kind of how I got.
Excuse me, Howard, when they said a guy like you, were they referring to who you were, your servant leadership, your character?
And I'm a high.
It doesn't matter the industry then. It doesn't matter the degree.
I'm a high energy guy, and I was a people centric person. I didn't, I didn't really understand servant leadership till I was in my mid 20s. I didn't know what it meant. I was doing it, but I was unconscious competent. So I forgot the second your question.
Well, what was it about the two of you when you first met, and the challenges when you went in there? Because if they need someone like you, clearly something was lacking. And also, aside, the reason why you didn't know it was servant leadership is because you were just being who you were based on how you were raised.
Well, all entrepreneurial organizations are led by entrepreneurs that think their product or service is the most important thing. But the minute you hire one person, now people are the most important thing. And when I got to Starbucks, it was coffee was the most important thing. That's all they talked about was coffee, which is great. I'm a lover of coffee, and I've been a customer for a long time of Starbucks, before then. And so, but I kept saying it's not about the coffee, it's about the people. Mm-hmm. And that's it was a hard time convincing Howard of that.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't that he wasn't a people guy, he was, but could be really hard on people, Canarsie,
Brooklyn, hey, we're the center of the universe. You don't even have to ask us.
yeah. I mean, a lot different than soft and gentle Seattle.
Oh, my Lord. Right.
So I kept telling him, Howard, I kept asking, what business are we in? And he said, we're in the coffee business. He'd get mad at me. What do you mean, what business are we in? I said, Howard, we're not in the coffee business. We're in the people business. And I coined this term, this little phrase, because I was trying to convince everybody that, and I said, we're not in the coffee business serving people. We're in the people business serving coffee. And believe it or not, it's been, well over 30 years, that phrase still is alive at Starbucks today. And I've been retired for 10 years. But I wanted to change what people focused on. And so that's what I brought. And I was relentless about it, that we treated people well. We honored them. I brought servant leadership into the company, and I just drove that. And Howard and I would argue a lot about that.
Especially when it's 2% and you thought it was going to be 1%, right? What are you doing?
He's this young CEO. He's trying to impress his investors. I didn't care about that stuff. I mean, I was a results guy. I believe in performance, but I cared about the people. I said, if I treat the people well, pay them well, respect them, help them grow as human beings. I have this equation I like to use. You grow the people grow the organization grows the business. And that's how I operated. And so I focused on growing the people, and the people did grow the business. It wasn't Howard or I.
This segues right into core values.
Yes.
And, it's interesting. I'm consulting with a company now, and they've been trying to figure out their core values for 5 years. And you could tell that they didn't have the core values figured out the way leadership was acting out. We finally have the core values. I said, this is what you hire and fire on. It's easy. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It's how you live. So talk a little bit about that, because you don't hear leaders talking about that much.
Well, let me share something with you. I think that will tell you the whole story. So this is a piece of paper, and on this piece of paper, I call it a picture of Howard in 50 words or less. You're not going to be able to read it. But on it has my personal mission statement. It has my core values and what I call my 6 Ps, how I do everything. So my mission statement is every day I want to nurture and inspire the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others. And that's how I live my life. That's what I do every day. Sometimes it's just picking up a piece of paper off the street that nurtures and inspires human spirit. Then I have my core values: honesty, fairness, respect for self and others, responsibility, integrity, trust in self and others, caring and love. And so I live my life against those core values. And then I have what I call my 6 Ps. This is kind of my internal reminder of how I do everything in my life. The first P is everything I do in my life has to have a purpose greater than myself. It has to be bigger than me, but serving others. The second P is if I have a purpose greater than myself, then I darn well better be passionate about it. All my energy has to go in it. I scream it from the highest mountaintops. It drives me. I get up in the morning looking forward to what I'm doing that day. The third P is persistence. Nothing happens in life without persistence. All of us are on these rivers we call our lives. And on those rivers, there are rocks. Some of those rocks are below the water. We don't see them. We crash into them. We got to figure out how to deal with them, get around them, over them, under them, or through them. Some rocks we can see. And even people have told us, watch out for that rock around that bend. And we hit them anyway. Why is that? Well, we do. And then there are the rocks, the most difficult ones, the ones we put there ourselves. Right. And those are the ones sometimes are the hardest to get through. But persistence pays in life. You got to stay with it no matter what, no matter how many rocks you hit. And the fourth P is patience. You'd say, well, patience is opposite of persistence. No, it's not. You have to be patiently persistent.
Correct.
Right. You got to be, and the most important person, you got to be patient with yourself, but you also got to be patient with others. Not everybody comes along at the same time frame that you will. So you have to have patience with people, and patience, most importantly, with yourself. You're not going to get everything in the time frame that you want it. Then the fifth P is performance. Performance matters in this world. If you have a child that plays soccer and you commit to go to that soccer game, you got to go to that soccer game. You got to let them know why you're not going to be there. If you commit to a monogamous relationship in your marriage, then that's performance. Then you do it or don't be married. At work, if you commit to turn in results, then you got to turn in the results, not on the backs of people, but with people. And so performance matters. And then the most important people. Everything we do, like I said before, is about serving people. So I try to live my life against those 6 Ps and against my mission statement. And that's how we ran our company. That's how we ran Starbucks. Period.
I have another P for you. Tell me how this would play in, unless you think you have it all covered there, which you probably do. Perspective.
Yeah, sure. Perspective is a good one. You got to have a perspective in life. You got to see it. You got to be able to see over the horizon, so to speak.
What do you do when people how do you honor other people's perspective that you disagree with?
Well,
like you're in leadership, so
yeah. Well, I mean, look at that. That's the nature of life. We're always going to disagree about something. Howard and I would disagree about a lot of things, but sometimes we'd argue like hell. Sometimes it was screaming matches. Sometimes it was sitting down having a conversation. People that reported to me, everybody talks about having an open door policy or management by walking around, but you really got to do it. An open door policy doesn't mean your door is open. It means that your ears are open, right? And you listen to other people because you never know what you're going to learn. Mm-hmm. And once people agree to what our values are as in an organization, agree to what we're trying to achieve together, what our greater purpose is, and then we're going to have different perspectives on the journey to get there. But you got to listen. You got to be open about it. And that requires lots of conversation. And just because you're the boss doesn't mean you're right or doesn't mean that you win. Mm-hmm.
Winning implies it's a competition, right? It should be a collaboration.
Yeah, it's collaboration. It's collaboration. And you don't always get your way. It's the way life is. And how many times did I listen to other people that were right and I was wrong? And how many times did I not listen to other people where I was wrong and they were right? And so after a while you learn. You learn to open up. I had never thought of myself as the creator or the answer guy. I was the alchemist. I would talk to people. I would get input. When I went into a store, there were 3 questions I asked of everybody, the baristas and the store managers, et cetera. I said, what do you like about Starbucks? What don't you like about Starbucks? What would you change about Starbucks? And, after you talk to enough people, they give you the answers you need. You don't have to have them. Bosses think they need to have the answers. You don't need to have the answers. Your people will have them for you. Just listen and ask.
So how did you prevent, as the higher up you get in a company, like I joke and say the air gets really thin up there. Yeah. And sometimes you wonder what they're thinking, like they didn't have enough air because they're so removed from the reality of the business, of the customers. How did you avoid that other than going into the company, going into the stores and speaking to the people?
When you're in retail, and I've been in retail my whole life, right? You cannot get away from it. That's your sole way of living. I used to say my day job are the people, my night job is the business. And you got to, I've had this piece of paper for almost 50 years.
It's in good shape.
Well, I've changed it, time to time, but I live my life like this. So I get off track. And I have to be open enough to listen to people. I'd want people to review me. How am I doing for you? Was a question I'd ask. And you got to be open.
What would you
sometimes people, it would hurt my feelings by what people would say. I admit it. But I had to learn to live with it and to accept.
But you had a relationship with people where they would speak truth to power.
Yeah. I wanted it.
Reminded me of. They say, I didn't know him personally, but I know several people that were mentored by John Wooden. And apparently he used to walk around with the legal size yellow pad and ask questions, and people would ask him questions. Did you ever have a conversation with him? You're reminded.
I did have a conversation with John Wooden.
Oh, tell us about that, please.
Well, that was a long time ago, and I was at UCLA.
He's a classic. Anything he says is classic.
I was giving a speech at UCLA, and he wasn't listening to my speech, but I happened to go out of the speech and there I was. And so I just introduced myself and he asked me what I was doing there. And I told him I was talking about servant leadership. And he happened to be an acquaintance of Robert Greenleaf, who was the concept guy behind servant leadership, the word servant leadership. And he just said about what a great guy he was. I didn't get a chance to talk to him about his leadership stuff, but I read his books. And that's who he was. and he held people accountable.
Yes.
Right? Remember when he said to Walton, you got that's a wonderful beard.
I love that.
Right. I'm sure you want to keep it, and if you do, maybe you want to play for a different team.
Right.
Right.
Good luck to you. There was a story. I don't know if it was him or something about, well, if you don't shave it, then I'll have to let you go or something. And there was something about, and he was questioned later on, well, what were you going to do? He said, I don't know what I was going to do, but he thought I was going to do something. It was brilliant. Yeah. And you're reminding me so much of him. So I'm wondering, I rarely go here, but it feels to me like there's very much I won't even use the word spiritual, but it sounds like there's very much a religious orientation for you that plays into who you are as a servant leader. Well,
I'm Jewish. I wouldn't call myself religious. Mm-hmm. But there are values that we live by. All religions have some core values. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Judaism was about giving and about sharing, and at its core. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's probably true. I wouldn't attach. There's a lot of people, when I talk about servant leadership, they want to equate it to, particularly in some sects of Christianity, but that Jesus a servant leader? Maybe, I don't know. I didn't know him, And,
I'm with you.
I assume by supposedly the words that he said that he was, but
well, he was Jewish, so
and
he was Jewish.
That's right. There it is. Yeah. So there's maybe part of that in there, but it's I had a great rabbi growing up who was my bar mitzvah rabbi, and I remember going in and talking to him. When you bar mitzvah, you go in and you have a conversation with your rabbi right before your bar mitzvah. At least I did. Our synagogue did, and we were talking. I said, I don't know if I believe in God. He said, don't worry about it. He said, God is within all of us, right? It's not whether you believe in some, and he gave permission for me to be me, and didn't judge me,
mm-hmm.
So
it's so interesting. I hear what you're saying so much about monotheism, right? It's all, I think the Talmud, it says like something about, love one another. Everything else is commentary.
Yeah, right.
Everything, right? And I have 4 children. One of my sons is on his honeymoon now in Thailand. Yeah. And it's like all the Buddhist temples. I'm like you see their story on Instagram now. It reminds me of when I went to Rome, everything was, a church. When I went to Israel, I don't remember everything being a synagogue, right? Because it's all the religions. Yeah. But so much of the Buddhism is from within. But in terms of holistic, if we look at just being kind to each other, it's really not complicated. And the world is such a better place. Right?
It is not. It's not complicated, but we just struggle with it. And right now we're really struggling with it. And
what do you think is going on for us today? Do you think it's the social, like you and I, we remember that we weren't born with the cell phone glued to our hip, right? Today we can't live without. Well, I can't live without it. Yeah. Doing Zoom, like this is incredible to me, right?
Yeah, it's a great tool, but that's all it is. It's a tool that we have today to connect us. But yeah, I think social media has had a detrimental effect, no question. People are allowed to say things they would never say face to face.
And they're not held accountable. There's no accountability.
No accountability. There's so much judgment in the world. It's just, I don't know. I have lots of thoughts about it that I don't want.
Please don't share. Why not?
I think that we use religion to sit in judgment of others.
Sure.
If you truly believe in God, then you treat everybody with respect and dignity, whether they're lesbian, whether they're gay, whether whatever they are. It doesn't make any difference because it has no effect on us. People living their lives. This stuff about worrying this whole deal about woke. All woke means is that you're aware. Substitute the word awareness for woke, right? That's what it is. You're aware of other people, their feelings, and how they're thinking, and you don't judge them based on that. You accept them for where they are. You don't need to be that way. You don't need to live that way. But we're so full of criticism and so full of judgment that it's just a shame. And I mean, how our politicians, many of our politicians treat people. I mean, it's atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm worried. It's the first time in my life, like I said, I'm 77, and I'm worried about the United States. Are
you a veteran, Howard? Were you in the?
I was in the military. I was in the Air Force.
Okay.
A long time ago, 60 years ago.
That's okay. I think it makes you a different person. I think there's a big difference between people that have served and people that haven't served in the military.
And so I just think that we're struggling, and I don't know how we're going to get out of it. There's just, I don't want to be political, but Trump let the cat out of the bag. It wasn't that all this stuff wasn't there laying underneath: anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia. All that stuff sits there, and he allowed it to be okay to go to attack people because of it. I mean, the things that he did and said and does, and the whole thing about the election. I'm amazed at how many people actually believe that the election was stolen. It's one thing to have an opinion, right? You can have any opinion you want. Just give me the facts, right? But just
so how do you feel then? Because you're right. I don't usually go into politics, but here we are. So let's go with it. How do you feel about corporations? They just seem to be taking on a much more political position than I remember in the past.
I don't think it's political.
What is it good? Is it bad?
Let's take Starbucks for an example. Let's see, 27 years ago we gave all our people, everybody in the company, partner benefits. So you didn't have to be married to get healthcare benefits.
Oh, your healthcare is amazing. I've always loved
no company was doing that because it was part of our values. We treated everybody with respect and dignity. Ours wasn't there to judge. These people were living together. That's what we said. That's all we said, that you have to be committed to each other. We didn't put them through a test. We said, tell us, are you living together, and is this your partner? 50% of people get divorced, so maybe 50% of these people won't be living together.
Right.
But we gave everybody all partners healthcare benefits, and people, even the unions in Seattle weren't advocating for it, and we gave it to everybody. Now there were some people that probably didn't like it, right? But Disney coming out and supporting their people and supporting the gay people in their company, and then have a governor attack them because they supported the people. It's atrocious. That's Don. I don't want to hear that he's Christian, because no Christian would act like that. That's fake Christian.
I don't even hear that. I don't even listen to that stuff.
Yeah, I mean that stuff is just garbage. And so companies are trying to do the right thing by their people. They serve the whole. They don't just serve one segment of the population. Do you really not want to make a cake for somebody because they're gay? Really? That's your whole thing, right? That's something wrong. That, to me, you're not practicing what you've been preaching.
So let me play devil's advocate for a moment.
Yeah.
In terms, and truly just for the conversation, in terms of separation of church and state, right?
Yeah.
If you say that, and this is not me, but if someone is like a fundamental, I don't even want to use a religion because I don't want to get in trouble, but what about if it's 50% believe Black and 50% believe white I'm talking color, right?
Yeah.
And a company says, this is our favorite color for a crayon.
Yeah.
What about the 50% that it's not their favorite color? Do you know what I mean? Like, what about including everyone?
Well, I ask you what your values are, right? And, religions have values. And
aren't they all the same though?
No.
Aren't they all the same?
Well, pretty much they are. Everybody says we love people, right?
Right.
We give to people. Well, that requires that you do it without any judgment.
Correct.
Without any judgment. I mean, it's not complicated. You don't have to be that person. You don't have to say it's okay. You can say, I don't believe in gay marriage. It's nothing. You can say, that's fine. You can believe that all you want. If that's what you want to believe, that's fine. Just don't put it on me.
Right.
And don't judge others. That's all. That's all we're asking is don't judge others.
And let me bring it full circle back to the leaders, the servant leadership. And you use the word empathy, right? Empathy is the ability to understand and feel what somebody else is feeling, even if you don't agree with them, just to be there and to hold them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
we're not talking here about murder.
No.
We're talking about how people behave for themselves. And somebody that breaks the law, they break the law. But we shouldn't create laws about how human beings act with themselves.
Well, then, because we come from a place of, this is the whole concept of what I deal with a lot, like with trust, right? In all relationships, there's more than one truth. Like if I have to be 100% right, that means you're 100% wrong. But most of life is gray. My truth is my truth. It doesn't have to be your truth.
It doesn't have to be your truth. People probably that are listening, they might listen to say, well, he's a liberal. I am not. Right? I am not. I used to think I was progressive, but in Seattle, I am totally conservative compared to the rest of the population.
See, everything is relative.
Everything is relative, right? I still believe all the same things I believe, but now I sit on, based on a lot of the people in Seattle, I sit off to the conservative side. Yeah, but I'm conservative about a lot of things. I just think the things that have to do with people, loving people for who they are, not who you want them to be.
Yeah, it's such a simple thing. It's amazing to me that people have a hard time with that. You are who you are, and I think you made the big differentiator, right? As long as you're not hurting others, it's your life to live.
Yeah, it's your life to live.
Your life to live. And what would you do? Well, I guess when you were leading Starbucks, people didn't have these conversations. But what would you do if you did have somebody that was so judgmental, so critical of others? Let's just take it as a leader. How did you lead that? Like, what did you do with that?
Well, it depends how they acted on it.
Mm-hmm.
Starbucks had room for everybody, but you had to live by our values, right? You had to live by our core values. Treat everybody with respect and dignity, et cetera, down the list. I don't remember the whole list anymore, but you had to live by those values. And if you couldn't do that, then you didn't have a place at Starbucks. You can have all these thoughts to yourself, all you want, but you still had to treat people with love, caring, and dignity. Even if you were anti-gay marriage, that you fine, but you couldn't be. That's not your job at Starbucks. You had to accept everybody. Right. Now, some people couldn't do that, and they didn't stay.
They would leave. They would opt out.
They would opt out, and that's usually what happens. But I just think that at the end of the day, if you want to have peace in the world, if you want to have a world that truly honors God, then you have to love people no matter where they come from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know how anyone could argue with that. So let me pivot for a moment, because culture comes into play with all of this as well. So you went to Japan, you led Starbucks. Yeah. So that's such a different culture. I think they don't have the word no in Japanese. Is that correct? Do you speak Japanese?
No, they don't say no like that, but they have. Yeah.
So are you fluent in Japanese? Like, tell us about that.
Well, I was in Japan every month for 3 or 4 days every month, because we were opening stores over. It was our first big market outside the U.S. So I was in Japan a lot.
And now excuse me. Traditionally, Are the Japanese tea drinkers?
Well, they drink a lot of tea, but they actually drink a lot of coffee. They were the third largest coffee consuming country in the world when we opened there. I mean, that's why I chose it. We chose it. You know, we thought it would work. But yeah, does Japan have different cultural norms? Yes, they do. But, you know, one of the things were hardly any women in senior management in companies.
You read my mind. I was just going to ask you about the women.
We said we're going to have women in senior management. Now, we had a partner in Japan. We didn't just have, it wasn't just us. We had a joint venture partner in Japan.
A Japanese company.
So they didn't have a lot of women in senior management. We kept saying, Starbucks, this is who we are. No matter where we go, we're going to have women in management. It took a while for us to get it, but we ended up having a president of Starbucks Japan that was a female, right? And who did a wonderful job, Deidre Wager, and is her name. So, you know what I found? So I didn't, you know, I was the one that pushed to go outside of North America. I developed the business plan. And so, you know, after that experience, it was about 8 years that I ran the international business. And I came back from that experience saying, we're all the same. You know, we eat different foods, right? We may practice different religions. We might have different skin colors, but we all want to love and be loved. We all want to be treated with respect and dignity. We all want to grow as human beings. We all want more for ourselves, for our families. You know, and once you wipe away the stuff that doesn't matter, that's all that's left, right? Is caring for other people. And you know, countries are different. Even you know, countries like China or countries like Saudi Arabia. But you don't think that people in Saudi Arabia want to be loved?
So Howard, it's interesting you brought that up. So right before women got the right to drive, I went to Saudi Arabia. As far as I know, I'm one of the only American woman that gave a keynote address in front of a mixed gender audience on business leadership.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating experience. The women are incredibly brilliant. Outside of Israel, the most educated women in the Middle East, right? Because of the scholarship. But what I found was, and I did so much speaking, and it really opened up so many doors for me in the States to consult and coach. But what I found is at the end of the day, we are so much more alike than we are different. And women in particular, we all want the same things.
Yeah.
We want to be loved. We want our families to be loved. We want to be safe. Yeah. It really was brilliant. It was, you know, we went into the bathroom with the women that have the amnesia, like everything with the only thing you could see is the eyes. And as an American, New Yorker, no less. And we go to the bathroom, they take it off. I'm like, shame on me. Oh my gosh, it was wonderful. So what do I ask them? How do you do your eye makeup? Because their eye makeup is beautiful. We had so much fun. And it said, look, this is cultural. Don't get Americans, you guys get so caught up on, we take it. It's so great. And it was really interesting because it was the first business trip I took where I didn't have to worry about what I was wearing. Yeah. It was wonderful.
Well, it's true. I mean, that's it. And that's the way it was around the world. And they're all different.
But let me ask you, though, about having the woman, because this is true in the States as well. And maybe it's a dirty little secret and people don't like to talk about it. But for a woman, many women, even today, to be successful outside the home, there is still an element of, if they have a partner, if they have a traditional marriage, their husband being supportive of that. Whereas you don't think about men having a supportive wife for you to climb the corporate ladder in the same way as you do for that women do. Like women will say, I can't because my husband will be upset, or I need to be. It's actually mind blowing to me.
Well, it's I hope that's changing. That's not my life. I will tell you that.
But in Japan, but it's
changing.
Is it?
Changing.
But it wasn't back then. I mean, it must have been harder back when you did it.
It was hard, but we did it, and we just kept pushing it, and I kept talking about it, not sitting in judgment. I just kept talking about it and saying, we've got to do this. You know, this is who we are. Look at our customers, you know. And so over time, it changes. It's not perfect. We're not going to be all the same. We're not going to agree on everything, but most things we do. In Kuwait, most of the retail clerks in Kuwait are Filipinos
Mm-hmm.
that they bring in, or other Asian countries. And very few of the, in Kuwait, the young people want to work in retail or in the stores. So we had, when we first opened there, we had women and young men and young women from Kuwait that wanted to work in the company and work behind the counter. It was unheard of at the time. And yet they did it. And so, we honored it, and yet I remember walking in a store one time after we first opened the store, and here were three women, full burqas with just the eyes. And what were they drinking? Lattes through a straw up underneath it, right? Talking as fast as they could. It was exactly the same thing that goes on in San Francisco or London or New York, right? Same thing, just no burqas, right? But same thing. And so, but this whole thing about women, I think that's changing. I mean, I know Starbucks, there were more, we had more women that were the prime earners, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of women that were prime earners of senior leadership positions.
So I do want to ask you though, how did you know that you wanted to expand outside of North America? What was that like? Where was that vision?
I don't know. It's a great question. I'm trying to think back. Here's part of it. It was part of it was something I wanted to do. It was I wanted to do something different. I was reporting to Howard Schultz, and things were getting really good at Starbucks, and I was feeling like my air hose was getting stepped on a little bit, and I need freedom. What did
you mean? I know what you mean when you say your air hose was getting stepped on, but tell me what you meant. People weren't letting you do what you want. It was becoming.
Howard, things were starting to go good. Howard wanted more influence in a lot of areas that I had responsibility for. And, you
wanted to give him the Heisman. I know you're a football fan, so you wanted to give him the Heisman.
I want to give him the Heisman. Yeah, let me alone, and so, I thought that, what else could I do inside the company? And so I said, I could take Starbucks outside of North America. I've got the skills. I'd never run an international business, but I knew Starbucks and I wasn't afraid. And so I developed a business plan to do it. And I presented it to the board, and it took 2 years to get approval, but I did. And so that's how it happened. That's why it was more a desire on my part. It was a dream that I had to do it. And I wanted my freedom again. I wanted space again.
All right. So where we know all about the servant leadership, where does that fearlessness come from? Because you are fearless.
I am not fearless. I have fears. I have just all the same fears other people have.
From the business perspective, from a leadership.
I don't know. I always never felt I needed a job. I always believed that, that you got to be fearless in your job. You got to be willing to give up your job every day. And that means that you got to be able to
risk
and take risks sometimes from just speaking your mind. And I was always a risk taker. I was not afraid of doing things that I thought were right. And so, that was just, I grew up in that. When you grow up in small businesses, that's what you see all around you. Right. I had aunts and all, they were all immigrants. They were all in small business. That's what I saw: jewelry stores, pawnbrokers, music stores, grocery stores, bagel makers, tailors, and I watched them all make livings. And so, that's kind of where it came from.
What do you think about clearly you're not money driven, yet here you are. What do you like? What do you think about that? Are you like, what do I need this for? Like,
I mean, it wasn't, when I had money, I spent it. When I didn't have money, I didn't. I'd save. There was a guy that when I was young, my first management job, and his name was Sid Sheckman. He said, Howard, pay yourself first. He says, take 10% of your paycheck, put it away. And
I bet your dad didn't say that, though.
No, my dad didn't tell me, no.
Right, yeah.
This was my boss telling me that, and I did that. And so that started the journey. But I was never really driven by money. As long as I had enough to, put food on the table, and I always believed I could do that. I was not afraid of working. I've been working since I was 13. So I'm not afraid of work. I like work. I like people, and I pick up cigarette butts when nobody else will bend over, and that was part of how I live my life. So, I've been with a couple of companies that, one of the companies, I invested all of my savings in it and lost it all. And Starbucks, I didn't know Starbucks was going to become what it became. I was trying to escape corporate life. I always wanted to do something that was fun. I always found if I filled my soul, right, and that everything else would work out. And it did. Now, I'm lucky. I'm under no illusion, right? Now I believe luck is where opportunity meets preparation. And the opportunity came along and I was prepared, but I was lucky. I mean, who the hell would know that Starbucks would become a multi-billion-dollar company operating in 97 countries? If I'd have known, I'd have kept all my stock. So I didn't know. I was just doing what I wanted to do. And after that week of working there for free, I said, this is my place. And I was prepared and I had good skills and I was willing to risk my job. I mean, Howard and I would get in some blowouts. I mean, really blowouts.
I didn't know this about the two of you. I want to interview Howard Schultz. Tell him another kid from Brooklyn wants to interview.
Any other guy would have fired me, True.
So what does that say? What did that say? What does that say about Howard Schultz?
He was a street fighter, and he
wanted a good fight. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was one of the few people that he'd put up with it. I think timing had a lot to do with it. I had lots of support inside the company because I was a people guy and people knew it. And so the guy that pushed me to come in the company, I used to go to him and say, I'm out of here. I can't stand this anymore. And he said, Howard, calm down. And there was a third leg to this stool, a guy named Orrin Smith. And it was the three of us together that really built the company. Orrin was the peacemaker. When Howard and I were going at each other, he'd just look at us and say, hey, boys, calm down, And we'd meet every Monday night for dinner or conversation about the company. And so we just found a way. But you have to be fearless as best as you can about losing your job. I had fears. I had other fears. I had my own insecurities about I wasn't good enough. I didn't have a college degree, It took me a long time to overcome that. And I practiced affirmations as skills to get over a lot of that stuff. And so, I don't know. It was just a lot of things came together at the right time and I got lucky. And sometimes, a lot of people work hard.
Oh, sure.
And never get the opportunity that I got, never earned what I earned. But, you just got to be prepared to take a risk sometimes. And I understood that I had to work in entrepreneurial organizations. No college degree. I had to take chances other people wouldn't take. And I did that. And I like it.
Well, that's the value of coming in from not knowing the industry or from a different industry, because there's no sense of, well, that's not how we do it. That won't work around here. You're like, why not?
Yeah, well, that's right. I was always, why not? If it's not illegal, immoral, unethical, and you don't poison somebody, try it.
And you don't poison somebody.
Yeah.
So if you could, do you ever think, selling your stock notwithstanding, do you ever think of, if I could have done something differently in my career, what would it have been?
I would have taken the risk to do my own business. I would
tell me more about that.
That I would have stepped up earlier and before I went to Starbucks, I was trying to buy a business. It's actually how I got there, because I was trying to buy a franchise business, and the guy that had franchises was also helping Howard Schultz. And I went to pitch this guy. My brother-in-law was going to loan me money, and my brother-in-law knew this guy as well. His name was Jack Rogers. And I went there to pitch my idea. And he said, what do you want to do something like that for? We need a guy like you right here at Starbucks. And, you could have heard my brother-in-law's sigh of relief all the way to California from Seattle. He wouldn't have to loan me any money. So that's how to
this day, he's grateful to Jack.
I was trying to buy companies. I'd looked at all sorts of companies to buy. And so I wanted to run my own business, and I just never took the chance. I didn't do it. And so I went to work for Starbucks, and I treated it like it was my own business. It was much my business as it was Howard Schultz's.
Maybe that's why you were fighting so much with Howard, because you did have that passion as if it was.
I cared and he cared. We both knew each other, cared. We
Right.
both loved each other. And he's a mensch. He's a great guy. He would do anything for you. If you were hurting, if you had a problem, he would be there for you. And so
I think people would say that about you too, Howard.
Yeah. So, it's just life, you live your life. And so that's what I would have done.
Okay. So let me ask you another question now, another little pivot here, if you don't mind. So how many children do you have?
I have 2 children and 6 grandchildren.
Okay. That's the best blessing, right?
Yeah.
So how did you live your values, be a servant leader as a parent, working so hard, traveling so much? That I know balance gets a bad rap, but as working professionals, we're trying to do it all, and we have to because we do it. But why are you smiling? What did I say?
Well, because I'm not a good example to ask that question. I worked hard, I worked a lot, but I did some things. We would have family planning sessions where we talk about our goals in our family, we talk about our values, and I would take my kids on business trips with me so they could see what I was doing. And I would have them in the meetings.
At what ages?
They were young. They were probably 12 and 8.
So they're sponges at that point.
Huh?
They're sponges at that point.
Yeah, they were sponges. And then when I was gone, they knew where I was. And, I was gone a lot, particularly at Starbucks. I was traveled 70% of the time.
Oh, wow.
Now, Lynn was, my wife was getting her PhD at the time. And so we had to figure out how to work it out. And we worked it out, but I did live up to every commitment I ever made to them, everyone. And I treated them respectfully. I was never judgmental of my kids, ever.
So what was Lynn's role in your success besides the obvious? Lynn,
I started out trying to be a Jewish husband. I'm the guy. I support the family. I do everything, right? And Lynn wasn't Jewish when she converted before we got married, but Lynn was independent. Well, Lynn was a second marriage. We've been married 45 years. And
a second marriage for both of you, or just for her?
For both of us. And we each brought a child into the marriage. And so, but Lynn was independent, and I struggled with that. She wanted her own checkbook. She wanted her own bank accounts. She wanted her own stuff, and we had to work through that. And I had to work through it, and I had to let go. And so you asked me what role she played. She set me free because I had to honor what she wanted. In so doing, I realized that what I was honoring with her, she was honoring with me. She never said, Howard, I don't want you to do that, ever. She said, well, she'd ask questions, but she always was supportive. And she was always there. But yet she was having her own career. She was an oncology social worker. And she ended up getting her PhD. She didn't have a college degree when we got married. I asked her, I said, what would you like to do with your life? That was a question I asked her. She said, I'd like to go back to school. I said, okay, let's figure it out. And 11 years she spent in school. I said to her dad one day, I said, I wasn't supposed to have to pay for all that. You're the dad. But, she did.
He said, joke's on you.
She was always supportive of me, and I was always supportive of her. And that made a difference.
And do your children all live nearby where you get
they both live in Seattle. Yeah.
And you get to see them a lot?
To see my grandkids a lot, my children a lot. Just got back from a trip to Hawaii with one of my grandchildren. When they turn 13, we take them on a trip anywhere in the United States they want to go. One chose Mexico. I said, that's not the United States, but we'll do it,
Now, why anywhere in the United States? Why that caveat?
Well, I didn't want to end up in a deal where one wanted to go to Europe for 2 weeks. I wanted to make it within some semblance of, I could keep the costs under control.
Sanity, yeah.
Sanity, and that we could do it in 5 days, Oh,
okay, great. Okay.
So two have been to New York. There's a third one want to go to New York. 2 have been to Hawaii. One is going to Mexico. Went to Mexico.
So that's that's 6. I was just doing the math. Great. When you came to New York, where did you stay? What did you do?
We went to plays 5 nights. We ate at great restaurants. We ate at all the little neighborhood restaurants. We had a ball.
Awesome. Well, people tease me all the time when, of course, I open up my mouth and they say, "Where are you from?" And my answer is the center of the universe.
Yeah, right.
And sometimes they say Chicago. I'm like, what? San Francisco, like, what? I said, not only New York, but Brooklyn. I said, if you shake anybody's family tree hard enough, somebody from Brooklyn will.
Somebody's come from Brooklyn. What I was going to, I had never been to Canarsie, and so I knew Howard was raised in Canarsie.
Oh, it's very different now than when Howard grew up there, but yeah.
So I hired a car and driver, and he said, "You want to go where?" Now, when I went there, the 7-Eleven had a drawer you shoved out. You didn't go into the 7-Eleven. They shoved out the drawer. They said, "What do you want?" They went and get it.
Money in.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. And so on the way to Canarsie, we stopped in Brooklyn and we went to a kosher restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And this was straight kosher. I'd never been to
culture shock for the kids, right?
Shock. But it was delicious, let me tell you.
I'm glad that you took them, and you should, if you come back again, you have to let me know. But did you get to Coney Island? Because where I grew up, when Howard grew up, you took your life in your hands going to Coney Island. Yeah. Now it's the place to go. You have the cyclone.
Yeah.
It's great. All right. This was amazing. I feel like I've known you my whole life, quite honestly. 2 more quick questions. Yeah. 2 more, if I may. Yeah. What is the one main thing you've learned about life that you want the listeners to know?
That if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. Write your goals down, write a plan for your life, have your mission statement written down, have your values written down, and a paragraph about how you want to live your life. You can change it anytime you want. Write it in pencil, but have a plan. Don't just float through life.
Be the author of your own life.
Be the author of your life. That would be the first. That would be what I would say.
Okay, and then the last question is, what's the last book you reread and why?
The Boys in the Boat.
Okay, I love that. But why?
Because The Boys in the Boat was about young people that came from nothing, right? That had a dream. They worked hard together. They had a coach that cared about them, a boat builder that was an expert in what he did. And they achieved a result that nobody ever thought they could. They won the 1936 Olympics in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, that was a great story. Do you remember the author if the listeners want to check it out?
His last name is Brown. I can't remember his first name.
Okay. All right. So how can people learn more about you? Where would you like to send them? I know
I give everybody my email address and my cell phone number. So here's my email address.
All right. I'm taking it down.
It's hb@howardbehar.com. That's my initials, hb@howardbehar.com. And my cell phone number is 206-972-7776. I will answer anybody. It may take me a while. I'm a little slow now, but I'll get back to everybody.
So what's behind giving everybody your personal info?
Nurture and inspire the human spirit. If I can help another person and my job is to serve others, then, if somebody wants to ask a question or they just want to talk to somebody. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a counselor, but I just think that's my responsibility as a human being to help other people. And so, sometimes there's a lot of people call, sometimes a few people call,
So we're all here for a purpose, and you absolutely live that life. So thank you so much, Howard. This was awesome. And that concludes today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And now there's no secrets. You have Howard's email. You have his cell phone number. And since I know you loved this podcast, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, be well.